It was April 10, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the world's largest and most luxurious ship, was embarking on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York. On board were people from all walks of life, wealthy industrialists, actors, and immigrants hoping to start a new life in America. The ship was under the command of 62-year-old Senior Captain Edward John Smith. Excitement filled the air, not only among the passengers, but also in the media. After all, the Titanic wasn't just the largest ship in the world, it was breathtakingly luxurious. It cost $7.5 million to build, which would be equivalent to $400 million today. The amenities? They rivaled the finest hotels, stained glass windows, intricate wood paneling, 2 grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, electric baths, a gym, squash courts, several restaurants, 2 bars, and a library. And most famously, the ship was considered unsinkable, equipped with every safety feature of the time. The White Star Line, the company that built the Titanic, boasted it could never sink. But just 2 days into its journey, on April 12, 1912, the Titanic began receiving warnings. Icebergs, huge, looming threats in the Atlantic Ocean. Despite these warnings, although the Titanic altered its course twice, it did not reduce its speed. 2 days later, on April 14th, more warnings came in, but Captain Smith and his crew kept the ship speeding forward. Then, at 11:39 p.m., Frederick Fleet, a lookout stationed in the Crow's Nest, spotted it. A massive iceberg. He rang the bell 3 times to alert the crew below and shouted through the phone to the officers on the bridge. "Iceberg right ahead! Turn the ship!" First Officer William, hearing the alarm, ordered the engine room to turn the ship left. But it was too late. Just 1 minute later, at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic collided with the iceberg. This was no small chunk of ice. It was 200 feet by 400 feet in size and towered up to the Crow's Nest. Scientists estimate it weighed 1.5 million tons. The collision created a series of small, deadly holes along the ship's front right side. 20 minutes later, at midnight, Captain Smith gave the order: distress signals, radio calls, anything to alert nearby ships. Senior radio operator Jack Phillips sent out distress signal after distress signal, hoping for rescue. At 12:20 a.m., the RMS Carpathia picked up the signal. But there was a problem. The Carpathia was 160 kilometers away. It would take 3.5 hours to reach the Titanic. Meanwhile, Captain Smith ordered the lifeboats to be prepared, prioritizing women and children. But the harsh reality was clear. There were not enough lifeboats. Panic set in as the minutes ticked by. At 2:05 a.m., the final lifeboat was launched, leaving 1,500 souls still aboard. Those who didn't go down with the ship soon drowned, or worse, succumbed to the deadly cold of the -2°C waters. At that temperature, survival was measured in minutes. Captain Edward Smith, now overwhelmed by hypothermia, remained at his post until the very end, going down with his ship. An hour later, the Carpathia arrived, too late. It found only bodies floating in the icy waters, though 705 people in lifeboats were saved. But wait, how would you feel if I told you there was another ship nearby? Just 37 kilometers away that night. A ship that could have saved the passengers. It's true, that ship was the SS Californian. Only 1 hour before the Titanic hit the iceberg, the Californian had sent the last warning, urging caution due to the heavy icebergs. After sending the warning at 11:15 p.m., the Californian's radio operator turned off the radio for the night. The ship had stopped, considering the ice too dangerous. And that's why the Titanic's distress calls never reached the Californian. Ironically, the ship was so close that passengers aboard the Titanic could see it on the horizon. As they loaded lifeboats, one officer even said, "Look, there's a ship. It'll come for us." But the Californian never arrived, even after Titanic launched rockets and flares. Crew members aboard the Californian saw the rockets and reported them to Captain Stanley Lord, who shrugged them off. He assumed the wealthy passengers of the Titanic were celebrating. If only he had taken those flares seriously. How many more lives could have been saved? The next morning, when the Californian's radio was turned back on, they heard Titanic's SOS calls. They rushed to the scene, but by then it was too late. Only the dead were left. Both inquiries blamed Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian. But can we blame one man for such a disaster? The Titanic's builders didn't equip it with enough lifeboats because they believed it couldn't sink. Captain Smith failed to conduct safety drills, even canceling one on the day of the crash. And in a moment of panic, the Titanic's helmsman, Robert Hichens, turned the ship the wrong way, bringing it closer to the iceberg. There were warnings, many of them, telling the Titanic to slow down, to proceed cautiously. Why didn't they? Some say Joseph Bruce Ismay, chairman of the White Star Line, pressured Captain Smith to maintain full speed, to break records. They wanted the Titanic to be the fastest, not just the biggest. This tragedy changed the world. New regulations and safety standards were put in place to prevent future disasters. In 1914, the International Ice Patrol was formed to monitor icebergs. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, was established to ensure enough lifeboats on board for every passenger. The Titanic wreck itself lay undiscovered for over 70 years. It wasn't until September 1985 that ocean explorer Robert Ballard found the wreck 3.8 kilometers deep on the ocean floor, split into two pieces. Even today, over a century later, the Titanic continues to captivate. Australian billionaire Clive Palmer once announced plans to build Titanic 2, an exact replica, promising to follow the same route. He claimed everything inside would be recreated as it was on the original ship. Initially, Titanic 2 was supposed to be completed by 2016, but as of 2022, the project remains unfinished due to countless delays. People just aren't as interested in the idea anymore. Why? Because a replica of the Titanic, with no television, no Wi-Fi, seems more like a relic of the past than a future voyage. So it seems that the dream of Titanic 2 has already sunk before it could even set sail.